The Nairobi sun had barely risen when Zuri and her mother stepped out of the taxi, their shoes crunching against dry gravel. Before them stood the old family house, weathered, quiet, and heavy with memories that neither of them had lived through. It had been 2 weeks since Grandma Wanjiku passed away. The old woman had lived alone for years, tucked away in this dusty corner of the city, where most people had forgotten the street even existed. Now, the house belonged to Zuri's mother, and by extension, Zuri too. She would have wanted us to keep it, Mama said softly, unlocking the rusted gate. This house is part of our blood. Zuri didn't reply. She was 16, tall for her age, with smart eyes and a quiet boldness that often kept people guessing. Her hoodie hung loosely over her slim frame as she dragged a suitcase through the gate. The air around the compound was oddly still, like the house was holding its breath. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of camphor and dust. Old furniture sat like sleepy elders. Paint peeled off the walls in places, and cobwebs clung to corners like little secrets. Zuri wandered through the house, letting her fingers graze faded curtains and wooden banisters. It felt like walking through someone else's dream. Then she found it. At the end of the narrow hallway, behind the squeaky door that led to the storage room, Zuri spotted a chest. It was wooden, low to the ground, and covered with a faded chitinge cloth. Something about it whispered, "Open me." She knelt, tugged the cloth aside, and lifted the heavy lid. Inside were old clothes, torn newspapers, dried herbs, and a few black and white photographs. But beneath them, lying diagonally at the bottom, was a mirror. It was oval shaped with a carved wooden frame. Beautiful, but cracked. A long fracture ran through the center, splitting her face into two when she looked into it. Zuri gasped for a second, just a second. Her reflection smiled before she did. Then it winked. She blinked hard, rubbed her eyes, and looked again. Nothing. The mirror showed her face, same as always. Maybe it was just a crack, just her mind playing games. Still, her heart pounded. Zuri, her mother called from the kitchen. Come help me unpack. Zuri quickly pushed the mirror back into the chest and closed the lid. She stood there for a moment, staring at it. Why would Grandma Wanjiku keep a broken mirror? And why did it feel wrong? She left the room without answering those questions, but as she walked down the hallway, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had seen her, something inside the mirror. Later that evening, the house had settled into an uneasy silence. Nairobi's distant city noise hummed faintly through the open windows, and the air was thick with the smell of boiling beans from the kitchen. Zuri sat alone in the small guest bedroom, now hers, with her knees pulled up to her chest. Her sketch pad lay forgotten on the bed. The mirror wouldn't leave her mind. That wink, she tried to explain it to herself again. The glass was cracked. You're tired. You imagined it. But her thoughts kept circling back to that one moment where her reflection smiled first. Just a split second before she moved, as though it was ahead of her, or not quite her at all. The sun dipped below the horizon. Shadows stretched long across the floor. Curiosity, that dangerous whisperer, tugged at her mind. Zuri got up, slipped out of her room, and crept back toward the storage room at the end of the hallway. The floor creaked beneath her bare feet, and the door groaned softly when she pushed it open. The chest was still there, exactly where she had left it. She opened the lid slowly. Her fingers trembled, but her eyes were steady. She lifted the mirror out with both hands. It was heavier than she remembered. She sat on the floor, holding it up to her face. For a few seconds, nothing. Just her. But as she tilted it slightly to one side, the fractured glass distorted her features, splitting her lips, bending her eyes, slicing her reflection in half. Still, she stared. And then it happened again. Her reflection blinked. She hadn't blinked. Her mouth stayed still, but the reflection's lips curled into a slow, sly grin. Zuri dropped the mirror with a soft thud and backed away until her shoulders hit the wall. No, she whispered. What is this? She waited a long moment before crawling forward and looking again. Now the reflection was just still, unmoving, plain, but you saw it. She rubbed her eyes furiously and laughed nervously. Maybe I'm going crazy, she muttered to herself. It's just a stupid broken mirror. Still, her skin crawled as she carefully slid the mirror back into the chest and closed the lid once more. This time, she dropped the cloth over it like she was covering something dead. Zuri stood, wiped her palms on her jeans, and left the room, but not before casting one last glance over her shoulder. She could have sworn she heard something inside the chest exhale. The next morning started like any other, but everything felt off. Zuri sat at the breakfast table stirring her tea slowly, her mind foggy. Her mother chatted about rearranging the living room, but her words sounded like a distant radio in Zuri's ears. You okay? Mama asked, placing slices of bread on a plate. You're quiet. Zuri nodded slowly. I just didn't sleep well. You kept talking in your sleep, Mama said, pausing to look at her. You were saying something about a mirror. Zuri's eyes widened slightly, but she quickly looked away. I don't remember. That was a lie. She did remember. Shadows slipping under the door, fingers touching her face, and that smile staring back at her from the broken mirror. At school, things got weirder. She was walking past the courtyard when her best friend Leah brushed right by her without a single word. Zuri stopped and turned. Leah? She called out. No answer. Leah just kept walking and laughing with two other girls. Later in biology class, the teacher frowned as he scanned the room. Where's Zuri Mutoni? She's supposed to present her assignment today. Zuri blinked. I'm right here, she said, confused. The class turned to look at her slowly. The teacher stared. You were marked absent this morning, but I came to school. I was in assembly. I signed in. He checked his list again, frowning. Strange. That evening, when Zuri opened her school notebook to revise, her notes looked different, neater, perfect. She flipped through the pages. The handwriting was still hers, but something about it felt tighter, more controlled. And there were notes she didn't remember writing. She stared at a page that read, Do not stare into the mirror for too long. She learns quickly. Her heart thudded. She hadn't written that. Zuri slammed the book shut and jumped up from the bed. What is happening to me? She turned to the full-length mirror hanging on the back of the door and froze. Her reflection was already facing her. Zuri hadn't turned around yet, but the girl in the mirror had, and she was smiling again. Zuri didn't sleep that night. She lay under her blanket with the lights on, clutching her pillow like it could protect her. Every now and then, she glanced at the door, afraid the mirror would move again, or worse, that she would. At exactly 2:43 a.m., she heard footsteps outside her room. Soft were slow, barefoot. She froze. The footsteps stopped at her door. She held her breath. Then, nothing. When morning finally came, Zuri felt like her body didn't belong to her. Her limbs were heavy, her head light. Her mother asked if she was sick, but she only mumbled something and wandered off. She needed answers, and she knew where to look. Back in the storage room, the air smelled of old cloth and closed secrets. Zuri pushed the chest aside and searched the wooden shelves stacked with dusty tins, old books, and metal boxes. Near the bottom, she found a faded red leather-bound notebook with the initials WM, Wanjiku Mutoni, her grandmother's diary. She opened it slowly. The handwriting was sharp and tidy, just like Zuri's had become lately. March 3rd, I saw her again in the mirror. This time she was angry. Zuri's skin prickled. March 15th, I should never have brought the mirror home. Mama warned me not to. The spirit inside it watches and waits. The more you look, the more it copies. One day it will step through. She turned the pages quickly. April 9th, I stopped using mirrors, covered all of them. But she's still there, in dreams, in water, in glass. She wants to leave. She wants to replace me. Zuri's hands trembled as she flipped further, reading words that seemed to echo her own experience. Final note: if anyone finds this, beware the broken mirror. It is not just a reflection, it is a doorway. It does not forget faces it has seen, not even after death. Suddenly, a sharp thud made her jump. She turned to see the chest lid had fallen shut on its own. She picked up the diary and clutched it tightly to her chest. Zuri didn't fully understand what was happening yet, but one thing was clear. Her grandmother had seen the reflection too, and it never left. Zuri sat on her bed, the diary open in her lap, her eyes flicking over every line again and again. The words felt heavy, too real to be imagined. She didn't want to believe it, but deep inside her, she knew this wasn't just superstition. Something had been released the moment she looked into that broken mirror. Outside, rain began to fall gently against the windows. Nairobi's sky was now dark and gray, the kind of evening that made the air feel colder than it was. The mirror. It was still in the storage room, tucked away beneath the old kitenge cloth. But Zuri could feel it like it was calling her name. She tried to ignore it. She tried to sleep. She tried to focus on homework. But at exactly 9:17 p.m., her legs moved on their own. It wasn't possession, at least not fully. It was more like her curiosity had melted into something else. A pull. A need to look again. She walked down the hallway, silent as a shadow. The storage room door creaked open with the same long groan. Zuri knelt before the chest, slowly removed the cloth, and opened it. The mirror was waiting. She lifted it out with both hands and sat down on the cold cement floor. Her face looked back at her. For a long time, nothing happened. The crack in the glass ran diagonally across her nose, splitting her forehead and chin. Her face was calm, still. And then the reflection blinked. But Zuri hadn't blinked. She sucked in her breath. No, she whispered. The reflection blinked again. Then it smiled. A slow, cruel smile. And this time its lips moved. Let me out. Zuri dropped the mirror and scooted back, hitting the wall. No, she gasped, shaking her head. No, no, no. She looked again. The reflection was still smiling. The lips moved once more, but no sound came. Let me outside. The light bulb above her flickered violently. Zuri scrambled to her feet, shoved the mirror back into the chest, slammed it shut, and threw the cloth over it again. She ran back to her room and locked the door, her chest rising and falling like she'd just escaped a fire. As she sat on her bed, heart pounding, she glanced toward her bedroom mirror on the wall. Her reflection stood still, but for a split second, she thought she saw two of her inside it. One, just behind the other. That night, Zuri made a decision: no more mirrors. She turned the one in her bedroom to face the wall, covered it with an old scarf, and placed her grandmother's diary beneath her pillow like a charm. She double-checked the locks on her door and windows. Then she lay down. But sleep did not come easy. When it finally did, it was heavy and dark, like sinking into a deep river. She opened her eyes. She was standing, barefoot, in the living room. Zuri looked down at her hands. Something was wrong. They were stained with dirt. Her fingernails had dark soil underneath, and her palms were scratched. She turned to the mirror above the fireplace. The cloth she'd used to cover it earlier was gone, and in the mirror she saw herself. But the girl in the reflection was smiling wide, grinning like she'd won something. The reflection lifted its hand slowly. Zuri's real hand didn't move. That's not me, she thought. Then the reflection pointed downward, toward the floor. Zuri followed the direction with her eyes. There were muddy footprints across the tiles, leading from the front door back inside. The door was open, and that's when Zuri snapped awake. It was morning, bright and quiet. Zuri sat up in her bed, soaked in sweat, her heart racing. She looked down at her feet. They were muddy. Her hands were scratched. Her pillow was on the floor. Panicked, she jumped up and rushed to the living room. Her breath caught in her throat. The mirror above the fireplace was uncovered. There were faint muddy footprints on the floor. Her size! She ran back to her room, grabbed her phone, and opened the security camera app her mother had installed in the house. The cameras weren't fancy, but they showed enough. She scrolled through the night footage. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the hallway camera showed Zuri stepping out of her room, barefoot, smiling. She moved slowly, like someone in a trance. She walked into the living room, stood in front of the mirror, and waved at it. Zuri stared at the screen in horror. She didn't remember any of it. But the girl in the video had her face, her body, a grin. Zuri's hands trembled as she whispered to herself, I'm not alone in here. The next evening, Zuri sat in her room with her knees hugged tightly to her chest. She hadn't gone to school, she hadn't eaten, she barely moved. The mirror above the fireplace had been covered again, the cloth nailed to the wall this time. The bedroom mirror was turned completely to face the wall, wrapped in two scarves and taped with cardboard. Yet, none of that made her feel safe. The security footage had confirmed her worst fear. Whatever was in that mirror wasn't just watching, it was learning, and now it was acting. She clutched her grandmother's diary, flipping to the last page where Wanjiko had written, the spirit will try to make contact, first with movement, then expression, then voice. If it speaks, it's almost too late. Zuri swallowed hard. Too late. The sun had barely set when the room temperature dropped sharply. The air turned cold, stiff, as if someone had opened a freezer. Then she heard it. A whisper. Her name. Zuri. She froze. It wasn't coming from outside. It wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from inside the chest in the storage room. She stood slowly, trembling, and crept back toward the hallway like she was walking toward danger. Because she was. The door to the storage room was already open. The chest lid had lifted on its own, and the mirror was standing upright, leaning against the wall like it had legs of its own. Suri took a shaky step closer, heart pounding like a drum in her ears. Then she heard it again, but clearer this time. A voice, her voice, except not hers. It spoke through the mirror, lips perfectly mimicking her own. You don't deserve that body, Zuri gasped. You waste it. You cry. You hide. You're weak. The reflection's eyes glowed faintly. Its grin widened, mocking, cruel. Let me have it. I'll be better. Zuri backed away. You're not me, she whispered. I'm the real you, the mirror Zuri replied. The part you bury, the one who's not afraid, the one who should have been born. The light bulb above flickered, and the walls groaned with cold air. Zuri slammed the chest shut and ran, her breath shaky, legs numb. She locked herself in her room again. That night, she didn't sleep because the mirror had spoken, and it wanted to replace her. Zuri barely made it through the night. The whispering didn't stop. It echoed in her ears like dripping water from a leaking pipe. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the reflection. Her, but not her, smiling wickedly, lips moving silently behind the glass. By morning, her face was pale and her hands trembled uncontrollably. She knew what she had to do, go back to Grandma Wanjiku's hut. There had to be something left, a clue, a charm, a ritual, something that could end this. She wrapped her scarf tightly around her head and stuffed the diary into a bag. Then, with a flashlight and a packet of salt, something she'd read could weaken spiritual forces, she left home without telling her father. The wind howled as she reached the edge of the village, heading down the dirt path that led to the abandoned hut. The trees creaked. Birds watched silently from the branches like guardians of forgotten secrets. Wanjiku's home hadn't been touched since her death. The roof sagged like a tired back, and the windows were smeared with old dust and cobwebs. Zuri stepped inside slowly, heart pounding with every creak of the floor. The air smelled of dried herbs and earth. She pulled the diary back out and flipped to one of the marked pages. The mirror was never meant to be stared into when cracked. The soul becomes confused, and the spirit behind it awakens. but it can be contained again. You must distract it, make it question its reality. Or, Zuri paused. Or what? That's when she noticed something behind the old wardrobe, a loose floorboard. She knelt, pried it up with her fingers, and found a bundle of cloth tied with red string. She untied it carefully and gasped. Inside was a shard of broken mirror, sealed in a pouch of dried leaves and salt, along with a piece of chalk, a needle, and a note written in red ink. If the spirit speaks, you must finish what I could not. Draw the circle, spill the blood, seal the reflection before it walks free. Zuri sat still, heart thudding like thunder. Grandma Wanjiku knew. She had tried to stop it before and failed. Now, it was Zuri's turn to finish the ritual, but would she be able to? Because if she delayed even a little, the reflection might find a way to step out of the mirror and become her. Zuri didn't go home, not yet. She sat in the middle of Wanjiku's hut, the broken shard in one hand, the pouch of salt and chalk in the other. Her fingers trembled as she read the note again, lips moving in silence. Draw the circle, spill the blood, seal the reflection before it walks free. The mirror in her bedroom was still cracked, still whispering, still watching. She pulled out her phone and looked at her own face in the screen's reflection. Her eyes, they looked wrong, too sharp, too focused, as if someone or something was staring back through her. She flung the phone aside. No, she whispered. You're not me. Zuri had never done a ritual before. She'd only seen things like this in village tales and Grandma Wanjiku's warnings, but the instructions were clear. She drew a white chalk circle on the wooden floor. Then, biting her lip, she pricked her thumb with the needle. The drop of blood fell onto the mirror shard. Instantly, the heart grew cold. The flame in the lantern flickered, then went out completely. She was surrounded by darkness, only the light from her phone faintly glowing from where it had landed. And then a knock, not on the door, not on the walls, but on the mirror shard. Three slow taps. Zuri gasped. She held the shard up and stared. There she was, her reflection, but it didn't copy her movements. It stood still, smiling, smiling wide. Its lips began to move, though no sound came. Zuri leaned closer, barely breathing. Then suddenly the reflection moved, not just its mouth. It raised its hand, and from inside the mirror, it pressed its palm to the glass. Zuri staggered back. Her foot broke part of the chalk circle. She scrambled to fix it. Drawing quickly with shaking hands, she looked up again. The reflection was gone. Zuri turned her head slowly and froze. It was standing behind her, not in the mirror, but in the hut. Same face, same body, but a wicked, twisted grin. You broke the rule, it whispered, voice like wind through leaves. Now we switch places. Before Zuri could scream, the figure lunged toward her, and everything went black. Zuri woke up on a cold floor, but something was wrong. The air around her shimmered like glass. Everything looked reversed, backward. She rushed to a mirror shard nearby and screamed. She was inside it, trapped. Her reflection, the other her, was now in the real world. It turned, looked straight at her, and smiled from the outside. You looked into me, it whispered, pressing a finger to the glass. Now I live. Zuri pounded on the mirror, but no sound escaped. Her voice didn't carry. No one could hear her. Outside, the reflection put on her clothes, picked up her phone, and walked out of the hut like it owned her life. Zuri watched helplessly. The reflection had taken her place, and nobody knew. And now it was going back to her house, to her friends, to her mother. Zuri cried out silently, her hands on the glass, but it was too late. The switch was complete. The reflection, now walking in Zuri's skin, stepped into the family compound. Her mother smiled from the kitchen window. You came back early, Zuri, she said. The impostor smiled back, soft and innocent. I missed home, Mama. She sounded just like Zuri, looked like her, even walked like her. But inside, it wasn't Zuri. It was something else, something ancient, cunning, and cruel. The real Zuri, still trapped behind the mirror, watched from the other side, screaming in silence. At night, the impostor stood in front of Zuri's bedroom mirror. I'm doing better than you ever did, it whispered to the glass. You were weak, always doubting, always afraid. Zuri's eyes blazed from the other side of the mirror. She mouthed angrily, I will come back. The reflection laughed softly. You gave me the door. Now you want to close it? It blew a kiss at the glass and turned off the light. Zuri was left in the dark, watching, waiting, plotting. Days passed. The impostor blended perfectly, too perfectly. He smiled more than Zuri ever did, got better grades, was kinder to her mother, more popular at school. People whispered, Zuri has changed, for the better. But Ayo, Zuri's childhood friend, wasn't fooled. You're not her, he said one evening after school. The impostor paused. Of course I am, he smiled. Ayo leaned in, whispering, Zuri hated mangoes. You just ate three. For a moment, the mask slipped. The smile stiffened, then it laughed. She grew up, but Ayo wasn't convinced. That night he searched Zuri's hut. In the broken mirror, he saw Zuri's face trapped behind the glass, crying, mouthing his name. Zuri, he gasped. Her hands pounded silently. Ayo stumbled back, heart racing. The reflection in the real world knew. She turned suddenly. What are you doing in my room? She asked, voice sharp like shattered glass. Ayo forced a smile. Just checking on you. As he left, his mind raced. Zuri was alive, but trapped. He had to find a way to bring her back. Before the impostor destroyed everything, Ayo couldn't sleep. Zuri's eyes haunted him, those real desperate eyes behind the broken glass. He had to help her, but how? The next morning, he visited the old herbalist, Baba Oj, who lived near the edge of the forest. People said Baba Oj could speak with spirits and had once sealed a demon in a calabash. Ayo told him everything. Baba Oj listened in silence, eyes closed, and finally opened them. You've seen the mirror spirit, he said. Long ago, mirrors were used to trap wandering souls. But if broken, the gate between worlds opens. That is how it escaped. So, how do I get Zuri back? Ayo asked. You will need the original shard from the mirror she looked into, Baba said. It holds her last memory, her essence. If you can speak her name to the shard under moonlight, you may call her back. But the impostor, she will fight. The mirror spirit never gives up its prize easily. Baba handed Ayo a small pouch. Take this powder. When the spirit is close, throw it. It will reveal its true face. That night, Ayo returned to Zuri's hut while the impostor was out. He found the largest shard of the broken mirror hidden behind the dresser. He held it up under the moonlight. Zuri, the shard shimmered. A faint voice whispered back, Oh, Ayo. Zuri was still alive, but now the battle would begin. Ayo crept out of Zuri's hut with the mirror shard wrapped tightly in cloth. The moon was full, casting cold silver light on the village. He didn't have much time. He needed to find a quiet place to call Zuri back. But just as he reached the old mango tree behind the shrine, a soft voice spoke behind him. You're holding something that belongs to me. It was the impostor. She no longer smiled. Her voice was flat. Her eyes were dull, like cracked glass. I don't want to hurt you, Ayo, she said. Give me this shard. Forget what you saw. Ayo's heart pounded. He took a deep breath, pulled out a small pouch from Baba Oje, and flung the powder toward her. It glittered in the air like ash. For a moment, nothing happened. Then she screamed. Her face twisted and melted, revealing her true form, a pale, hollow-eyed creature with hair like strings of shadow and cracks running across her face like broken porcelain. You should have left her there, the spirit hissed, voice echoing unnaturally. She wanted to leave. No, Ayo said firmly. Zuri didn't choose this. You tricked her. He held up the shard. The moonlight reflected into it, and he whispered again, Zuri, come back. The shard began to glow, pulsing like a heartbeat. The mirror spirit shrieked and lunged toward him, but it was too late. A beam of silver light shot from the shard, and a figure stepped out. flickering but real. Zuri, weak, trembling, confused, but her. The spirit howled, retreating as if burned by her presence. Ayo rushed to Zuri's side. You're safe now, he whispered. But the spirit wasn't gone yet. He turned back one last time. You freed her, but mirrors never forget. One day, another will break, and I will return. With a final hiss, it vanished into the night. Zuri sat by the riverside days later, her fingers tracing patterns in the sand. She was back, but not the same. Some nights, she still heard the voice whispering her name. Sometimes her reflection didn't move exactly when she did. But she was free, thanks to Ayo. The village gathered that evening to celebrate. Baba OJ told the full story. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Fathers mumbled prayers under their breath. Mirrors were covered in every home. Zuri's mother embraced her with tears, vowing never to doubt her again. And Ayo, he never left her side. Together, they buried the broken mirror deep beneath the old mango tree. Baba OJ poured salt and holy oil over it. A charm was placed on top, a warning to the spirits. Here lies what should never have been looked into. But even as they walked away, a glint of light shimmered beneath the soil, just for a second, as though something inside was still watching, still waiting. Because broken mirrors don't just reflect, they remember.